God bless to all of you. In this video series, we are going to see or we are going to focus our attention to the Middle Ages, how church developed through the time, difficult situations, different times, involving different personalities. The whole scope of medieval history, starting from the 5th century, it goes until the 15th century. But the scope of study that we have for the moment, as it is provided to you, it starts with the 8th century and it runs up to the 14th century. In order to give you a background, our particular study landscape, you have to get provided with a map of the era. Otherwise, it is practically impossible to study history because history involves the places, history involves different movements, history involves different activities. So they are basically connected to a geographical place. So that in order to facilitate this video series, here I have drawn roughly the map of the Europe. You have England here and modern Spain, France, Germany, Italy here, like a shape of a boot, and you have underneath the Italy, you have Africa. When we come to the 5th century, it is very important to understand the basic division between the Western Latin Empire and the Eastern Empire. So, you know, in the 5th century, it was divided into two. From this side, you get the Byzantine Empire, and from the other side, you have the early Roman Empire. When Constantine, the emperor, arguably the first Christian emperor, who decided to move the capital city of the Roman Empire to the east, that is roughly Constantinople, somewhere here. And it was from here, it is the city of Rome. So there is a great shift of the accent of the political power. Here you have Rome, here you have Constantinople. With this shift, we see how geographically the western side of the Roman Empire is absolutely politically neglected. There was no political security in order to safeguard the safe livelihood for all the people, those who were living in. And the security was immediately withdrawn from Rome and it was established at Constantinople. And it must be reminded that when the shift happened immediately from Rome to Constantinople, all the barbaric tribes, those who were living in around somewhere from Germany, then it was not Germany, as we call it now Germany, it was the land of the barbarians. And from this side you have France, which it is called the Kingdom of France. And here you find different other barbarian groups like Goths, then you have the Visigoths, then from the down south you get the Vandals, and you find whole western side of the Roman Empire is under the barbaric attack and invasions. But there was no political power, so to say, to lead the people, those who were living in. And there are small scattered groups of barbarians trying to enter into the Italian peninsula because it has got the main governing point geographically and politically, that is Rome. In this time, people of Rome unanimously came to Pope to ask the real leadership, not only religious leadership, but also political leadership. Why? Because there is no central governance for the people, those who are living in the Western lands. I'm not going too much into details, but I am laying the foundation for you to understand what took place really in the 7th century. And time to time we see how the barbarians attack coming in. And finally, when you come to the 7th century, there is a fearless barbarian group continues to annihilate all the cultural and social values of Italian peninsula and in broad sense, the western side of the Roman Empire is called the Lombards. Lombards trying to govern the whole area of the Roman territories. And at the very beginning of the 8th century, we find popes appeal to Frankish kingdom, asking the help in order to get rid from all the barbarian attacks of the Lombards. And what finally happened? Pepin the Short, who is the great-grandfather of Charles the Main, famously we call him Charles the Great, he finally came into the political arena of the Roman territories, and he held the Pope, and he held the people, those who were living in Italian peninsula. And finally, they delivered Rome from the hands from these Lombards, and Pepin the Short thus created the Papal States in the year 1756. Until that, officially, Pope didn't have, Roman Pontiff didn't have a political power. In order to fill the gap of the absence of a political leader, the Roman population, the Roman people, they were asking the Pope to take the leadership. That's why he entered into the political dealings of the western side of the Roman Empire. When we come to the 8th century, we find creating the papal states we call. It is relatively small land. It is from Rome to the place called Ravenna. Ravenna is basically here. Ravenna at that time was a territory directly under the Eastern Empire. Directly under the Eastern Empire. But until the 19th century and 20th century, you will see these papal states where the Pope is the political leader. This small strip in between, called the papal states. Popes never tried to shift their boundaries, never tried to extend their boundaries in order to acquire more land into their states. Pope didn't try that. Why they were asking for this? because Pope cannot be a subject to another political leader. He has to be politically free. Then only he will be able to govern the church. That's why finally this papal states, now it is called the Vatican City State, but it is very limited number of acres it is there in the Vatican. Now coming back to our argument, as this was given to the Pope, then governing Pope was Pope Stephen II. Stephen II, this land was given to him by Pepin the Short. Then as time went on, at the year 800, Charles the Great, his grandson, Pepin the Short's grandson, was crowned as the protector of the Roman people, of the western side of the empire. And that created a bit of a friction between the Eastern Empire, because Pope has crowned someone to become the Western Emperor, who was named as the Charles the Great. The note which is provided to you has given an enormous extension of what he has done. But I would like to pay attention very closely to what he has done to uplift the education system in the whole Roman Empire, especially the western side. In order to study history, we need different sources. Especially, we try to get all the resources, especially the written ones. And from the other side, we have the archaeological support. So in history, what we do is that we do not immediately go and claim something, because history is always a dialogue between present and past. Some historical claims are wrongly identified. Some historical claims are exaggerated. Some historical claims are not really historical. They are prejudiced. We see historians, not only Catholic historians, sometimes secular historians and world-renowned historians, they have a misconceived idea that the Middle Ages are thick, dark ages. There is no improvement. The church is against the development of science, development of studies, development of philosophy, theology, art. That is a misconceived idea. Why it was really difficult for them to create something very substantial. Politically, it can be political, it can be social, it can be, when you look up to education system, you cannot do anything properly because of the barbarian attacks. In the 5th century, you find different sorts of barbarian attacks, as I have explained to you. And from the other side, you find the Islamic attacks coming from Africa, and they came up to Spain, and they were trying to invade Rome as well. So it is not really easy for them to create anything that sort of give a development to something, because they were continuously disturbed by these groups, and there was no proper political leader, and the Pope was all along the governing figure. So it was not easy for them. Then who preserved all these things? From the 3rd century, when Roman emperor shifted his political accent from Rome to the city of Constantinople, who preserved everything? Who preserved the great literature written in Greek, in Latin, especially the works of Aristotle, Plato, and all the other ancient Greek mathematicians, physicists, scientists? Their works were preserved by the monks in the monasteries, especially the Benedictine monks. In the Benedictine monasteries, they have a special place called the scriptoria. Scriptoria is the place where they copy. You have to copy everything. So every day they were copying the texts. That is the main occupation of the monks living in that time. And they were doing it's a great work. It needs a lot of effort. It needs people who are capable to read and write. But finally, what happened? These tribal groups, they rampaged into the monasteries and they lay waste everything. They ripped apart all the monastic culture that church has nurtured up and down in the history. So what really understood by the mind of Charles the Great was this. Charles the Great knew that if I get all these scholars into one place, I can develop an intellectual culture in Europe, so to say, in the western side of the empire. So he was called as the Holy Roman Emperor, Charles the Great. So what he did, somewhere his place called Aachen, it's called Aachen, somewhere in Germany now. Okay, so roughly it is here. It's called Aachen. Aachen is the place. It's a city. So what Charles the Great did, Charles the Great asked many monks to come into his palace. And there he established for the first time what we call the cathedral school. Cathedral school. And he asked the parish priests to have, you have parishes, different places. He earnestly asked the parish priests to have a parish school where poor people's children can come and study. Because the priest is the only person who is roughly able to read and write. So he asked in that way to start the schools. The term scuola comes from that term, scuola. So you have the cathedral schools, you have the monastic schools, and you have the parish schools, what we call the parochial schools. That is the system which developed from the 8th century. The Catholic Church started schools. Foundations of schools, Catholic Church started late in the 8th century itself. It is not a recent development. Church has this idea of education. So who is the governing figure for this? Who is the pioneering figure? It is the Pope and the Charles the Great. And they were the precursors of the universities. These schools were the place where a lot of monks, a lot of people, those who are able to read and write, Charles the Great get on to them. One of them is the great master called Aquin of York. And they were very erudite people. And it was flourishing in different places. The schools, cathedral schools, monastic schools, they developed in time. As they developed in time, it came to the requirement of founding something very different. Founding very different. That is called the universities. Who was the pioneering figure for the foundation of the first universities? Pope Gregory VII. Pope Gregory VII. Why I am talking to you about the education and foundation of the universities or the origin of Western universities is that the note that you have been provided with, it doesn't have that section. So I would like to, you can read the note and understand what it is, but better you learn this aspect also. It is extremely necessary that you learn this part. So the first university, how to found the first university. So they call it the guild. They call it a guild. That is what in Latin you call universitas. Universitas means the guild, corporation. So it is like it's a grand scale. It's a grand scale of monastic schools. So when we come to the first university, it is in Bologna. Bologna is somewhere here. Somewhere here. After Bologna, you find the next university in Paris. Then from Paris to Oxford. From Oxford to, in Italy, Salerno. After that, you have Montpellier. Then you have Cambridge. Then you have Padua. Then you have the University of Valencia. Different places. Universities were flourishing in different places. And these universities are interconnected. That is the beauty of it. You see, these universities were all interconnected. All interconnected. So, what is the curriculum of a medieval university? What is the curriculum of medieval university? Medieval university, it has got two steps. You have the first step or you have the second step. There are first step, generally every university has got the first step. First step means the liberal arts. The liberal arts. What are the liberal arts? You have basically 7 liberal arts. Okay, so these first step, 7 liberal arts. These 7 liberal arts were divided into 2 categories. In the first category, you have 3 subjects to study. They are not subjects, but they are different courses. You have to study rhetoric, you have to study grammar, and you have to study logic. Why it is necessary? It was compulsory course. Why it was really necessary? Because in order to communicate, you should have proper grammar. In order to communicate arguably, in order to provide a disputation, in order to provide an argument, you need logic. And you need different speaking abilities. That's why you study rhetoric. And that graduation helped you to be promoted to the next step. There what you have, the second step of the second category of the first step. There you had 4 subjects. Arithmetic, astronomy, then you have geometry, then you have music. All these were studied in medieval universities. Those 7 liberal arts were common to every university, basically every university. But they have their specialized. That is the second step. What are the specialized? You have theology, you have medicine, you have law. 3. You have theology plus philosophy. Someone wants to go to the second step. And you have medicine. The other thing is you have law. To give you an example, University of Padua. University of Padua is famous for students of law. Students of law. Those who want to study law, they will definitely come down to the University of Bologna. Those who want to be a master of theology or philosophy or natural sciences, they will definitely go to Paris. Others, those who want to study medicine, they will definitely go to Salerno in Italy. Or if they want to study more, they will go to Montpellier, medicine. So medicine was started a long time ago. So mathematics, astronomy, geometry, music, law, everything was started to study in these universities. And that laid the foundation for the enormous scientific revolution in the 14th century. We cannot really skip foundation of the universities when we talk about the scientific revolution in the 14th century. Roughly, this is the background which Charles the Great, foundation of his monastic and his cathedral school, monastic school, and the cathedral school had paved the way to all these different sorts of different categories of universities all around the world. As we come to the end of this scope of study, I would highly recommend to you get a map of Europe and roughly go through it. The ideas that I have discussed with you, follow the note, and it will help you to understand in a broader way the church, how church helped, including the popes and the emperors, to lay the better foundation for the European and the church history during this Middle Age. In the next video, we will discuss the separation of the church, that is the Great Schism. God bless you.